Thank you, Jocelyn, for joining us this morning. I was talking a little bit backstage about before COVID came along, and correct me if I'm wrong, the quickest vaccine was Ebola, and that took about 5 years. So really looking at what has happened is remarkable, is historic. We all want COVID to go away. It's not gone away. But certainly there have been significant advantages of what's happened. So first question, take us behind the curtain with your industry. How has it been?
It has been an all hands on deck, race to try to get the vaccines together, to get therapeutics together. Scientists collaborating, public-private partnerships, incredible innovation, incredible speed, partnering with the FDA in order to get guidance out quickly, in order to understand how to do vaccine development in parallel. So you talked about 5 years. We were able to get a vaccine far faster than that.
Right.
Incredible times because we were able to run certain processes in parallel. So there were a lot of really amazing learnings in how we did this and how to do drug development efficiently. And I think the industry has just really had its moment in terms of leveraging science and figuring out how to deliver for patients.
And have you sensed that with government agencies and regulators and industry, there's always a tension. There'll always be one. But was it one of mostly, pretty good collaboration with the federal government to have such a success story of creating vaccines and multiple vaccines?
Yeah, this was absolutely a success story in terms of the ability to get rapid feedback from the regulatory agencies. Operation Warp Speed, which was able to provide some de-risking to certain companies in order to encourage them to get more shots on goal. There was, again, public-private partnerships, both among companies and public sector. So yes, it was a very good time, I think, for collaboration, all hands on deck.
Going forward now, this country is still, and the world, going through some major supply chain issues. Where do we need to go? What do policymakers, in your view, need to do to meet those challenges?
So I think one of the things we've really seen is that companies were able to create the supply, but we are having a lot of challenges right now in that last mile distribution. We're still having challenges getting the shots in arms, and so countries need to be thinking about how do we prepare for that next pandemic? How do we ensure that there's the right workforce in place, the right policies to make sure that people are able to administer the vaccines, and the right incentives for manufacturers to continue to be able to step up quickly for the next pandemic.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader who survived polio, said he was perplexed and surprised that so many people were resistant to the vaccine. Were you?
I mean, it's heartbreaking how little trust in science we have seen. I think there were trends maybe that we saw, but the COVID pandemic really shone a light on this real problem we have with a gap in trust in science. I think it's on all of us to communicate clearly and transparently to try to turn that boat around, because that is really going to be an impediment for anything we try to do moving forward.
How can the pharma industry make sure that we are having healthcare basically for all, that just not the well-to-do are getting the treatment, whether it's on COVID or anything else?
I think one of the key things that the industry has been really focused on, that the COVID pandemic really shone a light on, was health inequities and what can happen when people are not able to access care, and data in particular that needs to reflect the broad scope of American experience when we're looking at healthcare interventions. And so one thing the industry can do is clinical trials, so we can increase the diversity and the representation in clinical trials. Mm-hmm. Our members have been very committed to this. We have clinical trials principles. We did a survey recently. Over 97% of our companies have concerted efforts to improve diversity. But we think more can be done, and we actually have some very exciting news that I'm going to put a teaser out for everyone that we'll be having some announcements coming soon on that.
Oh, okay, pretty big news?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. A lot of the discussion around healthcare now is very spirited. Sometimes it's nasty. But there have been, as we talked to Stephen Hahn earlier, there have been some bipartisan bills. Do you see, the 21st Century Cures Act, the right to try, FDA? Do you see that being essential moving forward with the future of healthcare in 5 to 10 years? We've seen the Obamacare/Affordable Care Act battles. They've gotten a bit tiresome. Do you think that there's some hope now, because at least part of the COVID response from Congress, not all, was bipartisan?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that healthcare is one place where we could have bipartisan solutions. I think right now, Congress is considering the authorization of the user fee agreement, which includes some very important regulatory science enhancements and things that would help pave the way for some of our most advanced technologies, cell and gene therapies, and other things. So that really needs to get done, and if it doesn't, we could see pink slips at the FDA sooner than we would like, which is really a bad situation. But I think the key thing is that we have to make sure that we're continuing to support the policy environment that makes the U.S. the leader in biopharmaceutical innovation. So we have a good policy environment right now. Last year, our companies invested over $102 billion in R&D. But Congress is also considering some less bipartisan proposals, such as reconciliation, which would have a pretty negative effect on our company's ability to continue to innovate.
And do you think, we're in a make or break time for the reconciliation. It expires on September 30th. Obviously, that would not need, as you mentioned, any bipartisan support. Do you think that is going to move forward right now? Obviously, it's something you don't want to see, but others are pushing for it. This is a push and pull town.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not going to weigh in on that one because politics.
Well, what about the future of innovation and how government handles that? Because we've had a couple speakers who said, there is, of course, a role for government, but let's not make it too big.
Yeah, to me, the biopharmaceutical research ecosystem, which includes the government's role with NIH, which is really important for beginning a lot of the research, and a really robust private sector working together, has been incredibly successful. We have a really good balance here, supported by policies like the Bio-Dole Act that facilitates the transfer of intellectual property from the government to the private sector. That's a really incredible policy framework and has led to, again, this unprecedented innovation. We are seeing now really transformative things coming through the pipeline. For example, we just did a report looking at blood disorders. There's over 500 plus blood disorder treatments in the pipeline, from cancers to sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is a disease that impacts 1 out of 365 Black Americans. And there are treatments coming through the pipeline that could completely change the outcome for those patients, could completely reduce the terrible pain and side effects and allow them to work and live a much longer, more productive life.
Last question. We're here at our first in-person event in more than 2+ years. We've been doing this virtually. It is great to see people back in person. But there's a certain COVID-19 fatigue, even though a number of our speakers, including me, vaccinated but still got COVID. How important is it for Congress and the administration to keep the focus on COVID-19? Obviously, there's a COVID-19, another package that is stalled, but some people kind of just want to move on, but this is not over.
It's not over, and I think, as Dr. Fauci said, more could be coming. Pandemics are going to happen. We cannot take our eye off the ball. There are really important, critical public health threats that are still out there. CDC came out with a report last week that actually showed that during the COVID pandemic, hospitals were using a lot of antibiotics, about 80% in the early months, and that has driven drug resistance, superbug-resistant drug resistance up incredibly. So we're seeing now some of the pathogens that used to be treatable are now 80% resistant or more. So this is actually exacerbating another burgeoning public health crisis that could be even more detrimental than COVID if we let that go unchecked.
That is a huge issue that doesn't get the attention it deserves. Well, Jocelyn Ulrich, thanks for joining us. Please thank Jocelyn for joining us this morning.
Thank you.